Welcome to Just Picture It. Tonight we're looking at the role that colleges and universities play in our communities. We'll be looking at the idea of public service and whether our institutions of higher learning can play a key role in improving society. This is also the very first show where we welcome our artist in residence, Eileen Clegg, a fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. She will be helping guide the visualizations for Just Picture It. Our guest tonight is Brian Donohue, the CEO and founder of the Enterprise Group. Brian started in the U.S. Army, where he rose to the rank of captain and then changed professions. He worked as a high technology and intellectual property trial attorney for 20 years before he began directing the University of California at Berkeley's Business Contracts Office. Under his leadership, he oversaw the work of 3 attorneys over a period of 15 years and personally signed about 10,000 public service contracts, which brought in $1 billion to the university. Brian has taught intellectual property law for 18 years and holds a JD and MBA from George Washington University in information technology. Welcome, Brian.
Maylin, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, Brian, you're introducing us to a new type of engagement that universities can play at this time of disruptive change. What is that?
Well, we're calling it public service contracts. And may we have the first graphic? Simply, it is taking the assets of colleges and universities, putting them in service to the public under the terms of a written contract. It is really that elementary. And what I'd like to do is take you through each of the terms. We're going to talk about assets, we're going to talk about public service, and we're going to be talking about contracts. So what are the assets of a university? Could we have the second slide, please? The university is a place of great aspirations, and it has a long history of spirit. Next slide, please. But its assets are the laboratories, the specialized equipment, the libraries, the curriculum, the intellectual property, the computer programs. Those are hard assets. Okay, what other assets? Well, you have the human assets. You have the faculty, men and women who have dedicated their lives to study, to teaching, and to public service. We have the staff. The great unsung heroes of universities and colleges are the staff, because equally so, they are people who have dedicated their long careers in the service of education, learning, research, and public service. But then you have all those special relationships that we connect to a university. The alumni. Next slide, please. You have the parents. You have the benefactors. These human assets are so enormous. So that's the assets we're talking about. Okay, now let's talk about in service to the public. This kind of activity, let me tell you what it's not. It is not for any private commercial gain, period. It is not for competitive service. It is not where a university can lower a price for services because they don't have to pay taxes. What I'm talking about is not research contracts. Now, we all have, particularly in this area, know about research contracts. I'm not talking about research contracts. I'm not talking about or describing what I would call student enrichment contracts, which might be internships or those kinds of contracts where the students are the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries here are, in fact, what we call the public. Let's talk about written contracts for a second. The agreement is between the college or university and some other legal entity. It could be a community group, it could be a community nonprofit, it could be a school district, it could be a county, it could be, of course, huge number of contracts with the state. Federal contracts, we all know about. It can be foreign institutions like of higher education, foreign governments. So it's an open-ended ability to enter into contracts. Again, I want to repeat, it's not research, it's not student engagement. What it is, frequently people can call it a fee for service. But what we've learned, a service is typically, when you say for a fee, that's cash. But it can be for exchanging of equipment, exchanging of services. It can be barter, it can be trade. So we'll go into some examples, but in fact, these contracts are subject to the Public Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act, and basically that's what a public service contract is.
So what you're talking about is the idea that universities are in service to the public.
Yes.
And that are ways for those universities to be in service to the public, which we could take advantage of in order to help us innovate at this time of great change.
Absolutely. Let me give you some examples.
Okay.
Okay. Can we bring up the slide with the infectious disease? This is in this day of...
so next graphic, great.
Yes, that's the one. In this day of the Ebola crisis, it's, I'll tell you, an actual case. A local county needed to have a certification for infectious disease control. And of course, the county didn't have the expertise for that, so they contact the university. The university refers the county to the School of Public Health, who then refers them to the infectious disease control. The principals between the county and the university, they come up with, some curriculum, some field exercise, some equipment. The principals basically work out the business terms, and then to close the deal, they would contact my office to do the public service contract, which that's what we lawyers do. We write contracts that are enforceable and clear, but it's absolutely a business contract.
So you
Yes.
come in at the end. What happens is somebody in the community reaches out to the university. The people in the university discuss it with them, work out what needs to be done, and then they come to you to put it into the right framework, to make it legal, because universities have a clear role in society, and some things are permitted and some things aren't. Public service is one of the things that is permitted.
Absolutely. In fact, it is one of the three fundamental pillars of higher education. There is education, teaching and learning, academics, there is research, and there is public service. And this contracting operates under that pillar of public service. Another example, if we can, in the next slide, which I love, is math and science education for youngsters. You wouldn't think a university would be in that business, but we are, and we invest in creating the basic curriculum, and then we might enter into a contract with a national publisher who might invest $1 million. We would then invest $1 million of services to build this great leading edge, totally robust curriculum, which would then be marketed by the publisher around the United States and around the world.
Okay, so let's distinguish between your first example, which was really for a county,
Right.
and the second example, which is really with industry. Is this correct?
Well, the
A
contract...
publisher.
Yes, the contract is with industry, but the beneficiary are youngsters around the world and
Okay,
teachers.
so there is a requirement that even if the contract is with a private institution or a corporation, that the eventual beneficiaries are the people, the public in some form.
Yes. And what I think is particularly exciting and what it's so important for me to do is to make, as you know, corporations are now, and the laws have changed to allow forward-thinking corporations to have social agendas.
Yes.
We call it benefit corporations, we call it B corporations, we call it shared value. But basically, corporations have these agendas, And what the message is that they can look to universities and colleges to be the instrumentality of their own agendas.
Wonderful. So now you've got another example. Can we bring up the next graphic?
The next graphic is a really exciting one, particularly here for me to tell it because I'm sitting in the Silicon Valley, but this is the Nano Fabrication Laboratory. And it was a piece of nano equipment that was valued at over $1 million.
Is this in the university?
It is right now. The machine sits there right now.
Okay.
We couldn't afford it, but we made a deal. We allowed them to bring their...
Who is them?
The manufacturer, who I think oversees, manufacturer of this, a nano sketcher of silicon chips. Very fancy. And we were looking for this leading edge technology so our faculty and our students could use it to learn. They're looking for an opportunity to place it somewhere in the United States so that they could show how it works. So we made a deal, and I must tell you, we got the thing for about 20 cents on the dollar.
Wonderful. So let's recap. The manufacturer wanted to place a piece of leading edge equipment in a university, in a leading university in the United States. The nanotechnology department wanted to have that equipment. So they came to you and they said, how do we make it happen? Is that?
Yes, we want to do this. How can you make it legal?
Okay, so that's a particular thing that you're doing, Brian. Is that correct? You work out, there's party A, they want to do this, party B, they want and then you say, okay, here's how we shape it so that it's fully within the charter of a public university.
Absolutely correct. And there could be some negotiations, some lengthy negotiations, to work out the terms so that we can basically make it compliant with the requirements of the university to be able to do this under its pillar of public service.
Yes, thank you. So can I have the next graphic? So let's try and sum up what we've just been talking about, the three examples about really how does the university provide a public service and how does it legally contract within the terms of its charter. So that's what you've been helping us understand.
Right. It's a little difficult for me because I've really done and signed about 10,000 of these. The enormity of the scope is impossible for the mind to wrap itself around. The graphic, if you can put it back up, is what it has simply come down to me. That graphic shows a university doing public service for the world, and the world enters into a contract where it gives consideration or money. And we're only limited by the imagination.
Yes.
These assets are there to be used for the public good. We just have to get the word out. We have to share what we've learned. And that's my purpose in being here tonight.
So you are a noted author. You've written this book, The Spirit of Fiat Lux. And the title is Let There Be Light, Fiat Lux, Let There Be Light. And it is in fact the motto of the university, that the university should bring enlightenment. So this is wonderful because you've now written a history of the University of Berkeley, which is the #1 public university in America. And
glad you said that. Thank you. Go ahead.
and so it's almost that in that spirit of let there be light, you've been pioneering this form of contracts so that, in fact, the university could be better able to fulfill its mission. But tell me, why did you want to write this book, The Spirit of Fiat Lux?
Well, there's a story.
Yeah.
And after 10 years of heavy-duty federal trial practice, I was teaching at night at UC Berkeley and decided to take a job. And this job opened up, and Maylin, on the first day of walking on the campus, I was absolutely literally blown away by the beauty, by the landscape, by the vistas of the bay, and
I
on
think you could
second,
rhapsodic, you could wax rhapsodic about
right.
Berkeley, but let's move to what is
Well,
the point?
so on the second day on my job, I took my wife's camera and we started taking photographs. And a year or two into it, I finally hit me, how did this place come to be? What was the ultimate animus? What was the reason? What's the story? So I asked two researchers, young guys, to go into the deep, and in brief, what we started to see was a simple idea that it was the spirit of the people, the leaders, the visionaries. It was their spirit of Fiat Lux, do light, do good. And that spirit sustained through both wars, the returning veterans, all of the political turmoil, and it is now that same spirit that encounters the difficulties that this country is having right now. So when I retired from the university, I asked some friends of mine to get together, and we started to realize that really the history of UC Berkeley is really not that different than any other public or even university in this country. We've all experienced the same experiences. And so what we started to do is just reimagine how universities, public and private, can be social innovators. They can redefine themselves using the legal powers and resources and assets that they already have to take on some of the most difficult problems that the world is facing.
So Brian, this is wonderful because we see communities wondering what's happening. Where are our jobs? Where are our children's jobs going to come from? What can we be doing at this time of great change with digital technology coming in? And you are saying, look to the university. It can be a lighthouse at this rocky time that can save us from the rocks so that we can steer around it. It seems to me we're actually going back to some of the original purposes of the founding fathers for having institutions of higher learning. I understand that at the middle of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln decided to put into place land-grant universities, creating universities, places where people could be educated that could be funded by land grants. He granted land to the universities so they could take that income and offer in perpetuity education for young people. But you're saying that beyond just education and beyond the traditional role of research, universities have a charter for public service, and we should look to them to help us in this time of great change.
Yes, we have to reimagine universities. We have to ask universities and colleges to reimagine themselves. But equally, we have to tell the story to corporations, the people in corporations that have societal agendas, and foundations. We have to tell governments all around the world that if they're taking on these problems, their local college or university could or anyone, college or university around the world, could be the place where they can get help with some of these most gifted and dedicated people, human assets, and the physical assets. I think it's also important that we and I and my friends with the enterprise, we want to share what we've learned. There are web-based tools. There is a great deal of knowledge that needs to be shared. And so we can help people do this, and that is what we are in the process of doing right now.
And over 15 years, you helped the faculty and staff of Berkeley begin to understand how to use this instrument. How did you tell them? How did you get the message out? Because what I see the problem is that somebody outside the university says, I have a problem. Is this something I can take to the university? And they don't even know where to start.
Well, I won't go into like the 15 classes that we had at our campus, taught by some of the best people on campus.
Who did they teach?
They taught the staff of the campus.
Okay.
We had a Top Gun class, which was for basically the chief operating officers, the deputy directors, and it was very intense. And at graduation, they got a Top Gun hat. Mm-hmm. And because you have to build the infrastructure and the knowledge and the tools. And again, what we need to do is tell the world that the doors are open. I think that we all can recognize that ever since the 2008, 2009 recession, that public institutions across the world have been very, very distressed. We pretty much know that virtually all states in this country, except 2 states, have cuts as available money for students. Classes have been cut. Professors have been laid off. So the message there is that universities and colleges, they want a new source of revenue. They want to be able to not just reignite this spirit in the frequencies of our founding fathers, but this can lead to help with fiscal sustainability.
In fact, in the best way, when you say fiscal sustainability, it'll bring money to the university to do something for the public.
Absolutely. And so the university is hitting its traditional roles, but it's also getting potentially, Malin, I was there. I signed close to 10,000 contracts, and it was valued at approximately $1 billion of unencumbered revenue.
Can I have the next graphic? So what I think we're hearing Brian Donohue say is that the #1 public university, Berkeley, in the University of California at Berkeley, has for 15 years been pioneering this path of public service contracts, and that he himself has gone around the university training the faculty and the staff in 15 boot camps to understand how to respond to the public. And now you're on a quest to help other universities learn how to do this, because it's so needed at a time of great change when we're trying to understand how to deal with health, how to deal with education, how to deal with all of these issues that are flooding us faster than we can deal with them. We should be working out how can we put together public service contracts with our universities to tap the tremendous assets that, in fact, we've invested in the universities.
You know, the funny thing is, Maylene, it sounds like what I'm talking about is new, but it's not new at all. The roots of higher education, public education, Abraham Lincoln, universities were integrated into the community. And allow me just real quickly to read a quote by a dear friend who graduated from a public university in 2012, Amanda. Not only are public service contracts legal, but they fulfill the original mission of a public university. One can say that over time, academia has become elite and closed off from public discourse. By opening our doors again to do business and involve the community in learning and social advancement, maybe we aren't so much being revolutionary as we are simply revisiting the original mission. I believe that what we are doing here is so deeply rooted in our values as human beings, and to enlighten the spirit of that, I'm very confident that we as a human body will re-embrace these original founding doctrines, and that will get us through all of these crises. It has to. It is the spirit of human beings that have always done it, and it's the only thing that's going to work right now. And so all I'm doing is saying, hey, let's go back to our roots. Let's get on with it.
Wonderful. So let's have a summing up graphic that, would you like to speak to, what is it that you've been telling us today, Brian?
What this graphic attempts to represent is the traditional view of how colleges and universities bring in revenue. The red at 1 or 2 o'clock is the government-sponsored money. That's the research, the traditional research to uncover new facts and knowledge. The industry in purple, that's private sector that invests for research. But the big one is the green one that says public service contracts, and that's a whole new source of revenue. So I know it works. I was there, and what our job today is to reignite that spirit, and in the process, get to work.
I am so glad, Brian, that such a big quest has such a worthy advocate as you. I think I can see the military bearing and the intensity that you bring to this. And these troubled times need heroes and big leaders. So thank you very much. This has been Just Picture It. Thanks for joining us.